Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rouse IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified. The what, why and how of the newspaper analysis from the Civil Service Examinations perspective. Today we are going to discuss the Hindu Delhi edition dated 4th August 2022. The topics which are to be discussed have been displayed on your screen and the timestamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. So before moving towards our today's session, let us see the question for the weekly answer writing practice. The question is from the Polity section and is written in front of you. The question says, the promise of irrational freebies during election campaign goes against the idea of free and fair election process. You have to critically examine this statement within the word limit of 150. This is the short question, that is a 10-marker question. So you are requested to post your answers on the eLearn platform and get it evaluated by our expert team. Their evaluation will provide you with the constructive feedback and thus will help you to write better answers. So now let us start with our first topic. This topic is titled as Reaping the Demographic Dividend. Now this topic is very relevant for India and that is why it is also relevant for the civil service examination. As far as the UPSC scheme of syllabus is concerned, this topic can be beneficial in GS paper 3 because it is related to the economic and social development, as well as it can also be relevant in GS paper 1 because it has a section of society. And when we talk about the demography, it deals with the population, and population we all know is a component of society. Now this article has been written in a specific context. The context is in front of you. The context says that the recently United Nations report, that is the World Population Prospects 2020, has forecasted that the world population will touch 8 billion mark this year and by 2050 it will increase to 9.8 billion, that is approximately equal to 10 billion. As far as the findings specific to India is concerned, this same report has also said that India is going to surpass China in terms of population by 2023, that is the very next year. Now also we know that India is undergoing a significant demographic change, and that is why in today's session we are going to discuss the associated dimensions with this very theme. In today's session we will have a brief overview of the rise of population globally. Then we will compare the India's demography with China because today's article has given us a comparative analysis between the demographic situations of India and China. In this very line, we will also discuss the factors which affect the demographic dividend. Then we will also look the challenges in India, and in the last we'll have a way ahead for this. So now let us begin our discussion in detail. First of all, this chart shows the changes in the population across the globe in different time scales. So if you will closely analyze this particular chart, you will come to know that there are various factors which affect the population growth and its distribution. And similarly, throughout the history, there are certain factors which were dominant in certain specific period and thus led to changes in the population in that particular period. Now this chart basically deals with the technological aspect, that is the technological factors, how they have influenced the population. So before analyzing this particular thing, first you yourself think that how can a technology affect the population growth or its distribution? Try to think upon it. We can get a very simple answer for this. For example, let us say that if there are certain advancements in medical technology, that is now we have contraceptives, now there are ultrasounds. The thing is that medical technology can help us to alter the birth rates as well as death rates, and if with the help of technology we can alter the birth rates and death rates, then obviously directly we can affect the population levels also. Similarly, the other technological aspects have also played their role in changing the population from time to time. So in the period around 12,000 years before till the birth of the Christ, we were having roughly the population of the world as 0.25 billion, that is quarter of 1 billion. And this particular phase was seeing the dominance of agriculture. In this particular phase, we have very high birth rates. Also, we had very high death rates. And because in this phase there was high birth rate and death rate, and hence the population growth was not very significant, and that is why we were having low population. Now cut to the period of 1600, whereby the population began to rise. In 1600 we had half a billion population, but this age was very significant because this was the age of European exploration, and this led to colonization as well as imperialism across the world. And because of this, there was a significant changes in demography across the world. There was rise in absolute population. Then there was also large scale migration, because in this period the slave trade started. The colonial, for example, the British, French, Spain, as well as other European countries were translocating to other African as well as Asian countries, and that is why the population level changed. Then we had the phase of industrialization. Now, when the industrialization started, the population started to grow rapidly. Now, here you might have heard about the Karl Marx theory. When the Karl Marx says that a society was divided into haves and have nots, then the people who belong to the have nots category, that is mainly the workers, they tried to increase their number of children so that they can produce more children, and hence they can produce more workers to earn their living. And that is why Karl Marx said that this industrialization, which was primarily based on capitalism, has led to increase in population. Then later on, several advancements in other sectors were made, for example, transportation, sanitation and medical services, biotechnology, and information communication and technologies. So, because of the advancements of all these technologies, we had a significant drop in the death rates. So now what was happening is that the birth rates were high in this particular period, but in the same period the death rates were lower. So for example, because of several medical technological advancements, we were able to increase the average age, we were able to tackle various diseases, and hence the death rate got reduced. But now you think that if on one hand the birth rate is increasing, that is, number of children being produced is rising, and on the other hand the death rates is reducing, now this will lead to the population explosion. Now this will lead to the population explosion, and that is what exactly happened in this particular period. Because till this period there was almost a balanced population. Then it began to rise gradually, and after 1900, that is since 1950s, when in the world history we experienced decolonization, there was a population explosion and the population grew with a J curve. And presently we are into 2000s, and now we are into the phase of Industrial Revolution 4.0. So that is how the technological advancements had led to changes in the population in absolute level, and this is also reflected by this particular thing. Now here if you closely analyze, by 1830 we were having a 1 billion of population. After 100 years, that is a jump from 1830 to 1930, the population got doubled, that is it became 2 billion. It means that it took 100 years to double the population. But then next 1 billion was added just in the span of 30 years. Next 1 billion was added just in the span of 15 years. So I can say that initially 100 years were taken to double the population from 1 to 2 billion, but thereafter from 2 to 4 billion just 45 years were taken. The population was doubled just in 45 years. Next 1 billion was added within a span of 12 years, and this trend continued. So this again shows the temporal aspect, that how the population has doubled itself with the reduced span of period. And given the present context, we know that there are certain regions which are experiencing high population load. And these regions are mainly the Asian countries as well as the African countries. In Asian countries, we know that the South Asian region and especially India is leading as far as the population growth is concerned. However, still the largest population is in China. Similarly, the African countries are also experiencing rising population levels. Then there are other countries where we have reduced population levels. For example, European countries. Then certain Asian countries, for example, Japan. So, if we analyze this particular context, the most important or the immediate comparison of India we all know is China, and hence we will compare the demographic situations of India and China. This is what exactly been talked in this article also. So, this is the age sex pyramid. This is the population cohort which gives us a reflection that at what age, what percentage of which gender of population is living. For example, if we see India and if we see China, the most important difference between India and China is that in China, this is the particular age group that is around 40 years, which is the most broad in manner. That is the most broad. Highest number of people in China are of the age between 40 to 55 and more precisely between 45 to 49. But when it comes to India, we have this curve. We have a broad bottom. And in this broad bottom, the first four layers, that is up to the age of 18 years, there is almost a constant population levels. But yes, if we closely analyze 0 to 4 age group, then here we can see that India is also having a significant drop in birth rates. And this we also know by several reports that the total fertility rate in India is also reducing. More than 13 states in India have reduced their total fertility rate to less than 2.1. So what does this comparison concludes? This shows that because we know that China was having a one child policy, and this one child policy has led to reduced number of new offsprings, but on the other hand, in the coming years, China will be facing higher old age population, and that is why the dependency ratio of China will increase. But on the other hand, if we see India, because we have this much room for our population to grow and then to become old, and this means that in the coming years in India, we will be having more number of people in the working age group as compared to China. And if we are able to reap this potential, this is what exactly we mean by reaping the demographic dividend. Now, what exactly is demographic dividend? Demographic dividend is basically the economic growth potential of any region, let's say in a country, because of certain demographic changes in that country. That is, if any country is having certain demographic changes, because of this very factor, if there is a change or if there is an increase in its growth prospects, then we can say that the present demography of that country can be termed as a dividend. And the most important demographic change is the changes in the age structure. Naturally, we can see that if in any country we have higher proportion of the youth population, and that too if they are engaged productively, obviously the growth prospects of that very country will increase tremendously. This is what we call as demographic dividend. Now, there are various factors which affect these demographic changes or the demographic dividend. For example, the level of literacy, education and the learning outcomes. Let's say we have a huge number of youth population but they are not educated. So obviously they will not be able to contribute themselves in order to grow their national economy, and hence there will not be a demographic dividend. Rather, they can become as a demographic disasters. Similarly, the skills are another important component. That is why India presently is investing so much in skill upgradation of their youth population. We have Kaushal Vikas Yojana, we have National Skill Development Missions, then we have several vocational courses being run in country in different colleges and institutions. The basic aim is to provide the skills to all the youth population. Similarly, the political setup also matters. For example, in China, we have seen that China was majorly a non-democratic country. On the other hand, India is the largest democratic country. So it is generally observed that when the country is democratic, that is more liberal, people are having number of rights which they can enjoy. So there the population can use their full potential. They can actually convert their potential into the national growth because now there is freedom. I am free to choose whatever I want to do, and that is how I can innovate in certain things of my personal interest, and that is how the political setup of a country also affects the national growth or the demographic dividend. Similarly, the economic setup also plays its role. For example, if the country is having a closed economy, and on the other hand, if there is other country which is having a open economy, by this I mean that the open economy is allowing the foreign investors, foreign companies to come to that particular country. So it will increase the employment opportunities, it will increase the competition also, then it will increase the market accessibility, it will also increase the supplies of the raw materials. So all these factors eventually will help the young population to contribute more in their national growth. Then comes another important factor, that is the government policies. For example, here we talked about the Krishi Vikas Yojana. Similarly, the National Education Policy 2020, it also talks about bridging the gap between the academic curriculum as well as the industrial needs. So the government policies also impact the demographic dividend. This article talks about China also. This article says that in China, they were having the policy, for example, the one child policy. Now it has taken away the leverage, the position which China could have commanded in the coming years. Similarly, the China also had a policy to disincentivize rural to urban migration, and this has resulted into a strong rural urban divide, and this rural urban divide is creating a huge challenge for China to reap their true demographic dividend. Now, on the other hand, if we talk about India, there are several reports of several multinational companies which are very optimistic about India's demographic situation. This article talks about two important reports. That is, the one is the report by Deloitte, other is the report by McKinsey. Now, Deloitte says that within the coming 2 decades, India will be having a strong workforce base of around 1.08 billion. And this report also says that this particular workforce will be better trained and educated compared to the workforce which India was enjoying in the past. Similarly, the McKinsey says that there are various factors, for example, digitization and automation, urbanization, demographic changes, robust supply chains, as well as focus towards sustainability, for example, using the renewable sources of energy. Because of these factors, McKinsey says that India is having a very strong potential of achieving the targets of $2.5 trillion economy in the near future. It is expected to generate 112 million jobs and around 30% of the non-farm workforce by 2030. If you closely see these factors, again, demography, that is, demographic changes, is also one of the factors mentioned by McKinsey. So this means that India is positioned very well to reap its demographic dividend, but then there are certain challenges as well. Because if we can convert that extra demography into a dividend, only then we can have a fruitful results. But for that, we need to overcome certain challenges. Otherwise, that excessive demography, that excessive population load will convert into a disaster. So now let us see that what are those challenges. The first and the foremost is the literacy levels of our youth. Both the absolute literacy level is very low, as well as there is a huge gender divide in the literacy level, that is approximately around 20%. The female literacy is around 20% lower compared to the male literacy. Then comes the status of our health infrastructure. We all have seen the status of our health institutions during the pandemic times. The inavailability of doctors, especially in rural and tribal areas, lack of adequate hospitals in these areas, and then there are certain indicators, for example, infant mortality rate, similarly MMR, etc., which showcase that India's health ecosystem is not functioning up to the level which it should do. The third is the lower participation of the female in the labor force. Now, again, there are various factors which contribute to this thing. For example, the literacy rate, as we have discussed, the educational levels of women is far lower compared to men. Then, because of the dominant patriarchal attitude of a society, women are not allowed to join various jobs. Then, there are also the issues of skills. Then, there are certain laws also, for example, Maternity Benefit Act, which discourages the company owners to employ women because the acts which are aimed to protect the women's right, they somehow in some manner they also increase the pressure on the private firms, because then they have to create a certain ecosystem which can protect those rights. Similarly, the skills and the technological levels, because we are a developing economy, we are facing a fund crunch, we are having a low capital. That is why our investment in research and development program is very low. Then there is also a huge gap between the academic curriculum as well as the industrial demand. The next is the lack of jobs. Now these jobs are both in quantitative manner as well as qualitative manner. First, we do not have adequate number of jobs. Second, even if we are having some jobs, then those jobs are very underpaid. Those jobs are not doing justice to the academic qualification of the person who is employed in that particular job. We regularly witness that the people who have done their engineering, they also sometimes apply for the post of peons in government institutions. And the last challenge is the high inequality in India. The Oxfam report has pointed out towards the wealth concentration in just few hands in India. So these are the certain challenges which are hindering India to reap its true demographic dividend. But now the question is again in front of us, that if there are so much challenges, then why are we so optimistic about this demographic dividend? Why our Honorable Prime Minister again and again say about those 4 Ds which India has as its own strength, and out of 4 Ds, one is the demography? Why these reports like Deloitte and McKinsey are so optimistic? The reason is because to overcome these challenges, it is not very difficult. And there is a huge ray of hope that if we are able to overcome these challenges, we can actually reap our true demographic potential. So now how to reap it? What should be a way ahead? Let us understand this with this flowchart. Now here there are 2 arrows. Now this arrow shows the demographic dividend missed. Let us analyze that how we can miss the demographic dividends. Now this is just one example to make you understand that how the things work, and if we are able to cut this loop, we can actually convert our missed demographic dividend to the reaped demographic dividend. Still, in a lot of regions, in several societies in India, there is still a early marriage. Now, if there is an early marriage, then obviously there will be a high dropout rates. If there are high dropout rates, then obviously there will be no concrete, no better employment, and hence the people will end up in the informal sector. Similarly, the early marriage will also lead to the early pregnancy also. This early pregnancy can lead to several health issues in mother as well as the child. Because of these health issues, the productivity of the population will reduce, and because of this reduced production, they will not be having enough savings. And if they are not having enough savings, then obviously they will be having insecure old age, and hence the entire youth population, starting from the adolescence ending towards the old age, we have missed the true potential of the demography which we were having. On the other hand, if we can have certain transformative approaches, that is, we can invest in schooling that population, we can invest in creating better jobs and employment opportunities for that population, if we can promote adult marriage, if we can increase investment in our children, investment in their education, investment in their health, investment in their sports activities, if we can design certain policies which are aimed to ensure the work life balance in order to reduce the stress, all these things somehow will increase the productivity of the population and also the productivity of the entire nation. And because there is higher productivity, then there will be higher income, more savings, and hence we will be having a secure old age also. Then here we can also reap the second demographic dividend, that is utilizing the experience of the old age population as well. So that is how all these challenges need to be overcome by these policies in order to reap the India's two demographic dividend. So now this was a pretty lengthy topic and hence we will revise this topic in brief once again. Now in this particular chart, we saw that how the technological revolutions as well as evolutions have led to changes in the demography in absolute numbers as well as their distribution. How with the coming of industrial revolutions and then transportation, biotechnology, information computers, technology, etc., the population has grown across the world. Then we saw that because of these changing factors, the time taken for doubling of the population has gradually reduced from time to time. In this very line, we discussed that there are certain countries in world that are having higher population load. Then there are other countries also which are having low population. In this regard, coming to the article, we discuss the comparative analysis between India and China and the nature of their demography and the factors which are operating in India differently from China. Here we understood that what is the exact meaning of demographic dividend and the factors like education, skills, political setup, economic setup as well as government policies, how these factors impact the demographic dividend. Then we substantiated the optimism associated with India with the basis of certain reports given by Deloitte as well as McKinsey. In this very line, we discussed that there are certain challenges to reap the demographic dividend of India. And these challenges are in terms of the poor literacy levels, poor health infrastructure, low female participation in the labor force, lack of skills and technologies available in India, lack of quality jobs, as well as higher inequality. And then to overcome this challenge, we learned through this particular diagram that how we can transform the factors which hinder the demographic dividend to the factors which can increase the demographic dividend. Now this topic has appeared at page number 7 and is in relation to the recent visit paid by Maldivian President to India. The context of this very topic is the increasing presence of China in the Indian Ocean and its debt trap policy, which is affecting several countries in the rim of the Indian Ocean. And in this very regard, the Maldivian president has said that the regional trade networks of the Indian Ocean states needs to be revitalized. These trade networks were existing in the ancient or the medieval period, and that is why these regional trade networks can be revitalized, can be strengthened in order to ensure better connectivity and to ensure peaceful living in the Indian Ocean region. So in this very regard, in today's session, we will be discussing that what exactly is the China's One Belt and One Road initiative, which are those countries which have fallen into the debt trap policy of China, and what are some of the important trade networks which were there in the ancient period in the Indian Ocean. So first of all, the China's OBOR, that is One Belt and One Road initiative, is theoretically an economic initiative which aims to build the economic corridors, that is both via sea as well as land, and to ensure better connectivity of this particular region. That means this is intercontinental initiative which connects Asia to Europe to Africa along with this particular Indian Ocean region. So OBOR has two components. One is the maritime component, which is known as the Maritime Silk Road Initiative, and the other is the land component, which is the Silk Road Economic Belt. As you can see here, this line which is marked in red is the land route, that is Silk Road Economic Belt, and the line in the blue color is the maritime route, that is the route via sea. So China aims to connect the land as well as sea in this manner, and this completely is known as One Belt One Road initiative. It will start from the eastern part of China itself, will connect the Central Asia with the Europe, and from the Indian Ocean it will pass through the Southeast Asia, will connect India, Sri Lanka, Indian Ocean and African countries, and then back to Europe. So, in order to fulfill its own objectives, China has initiated several policies of providing finances to the smaller countries. It used to give several sovereign debts, and this particular map shows that which are those countries which have fallen into the debt trap. The red color shows those countries which are falling in higher risk zone category, for example, Mongolia as well as Pakistan. Then countries like Afghanistan, Djibouti, Montenegro, Sri Lanka, Laos, etc. those countries which are falling in significant risks. And today we know the economic crisis through which Sri Lanka is going through. Similarly, Maldives has also been fallen into the debt trap policy of China, and that is why Maldivian president is of utmost concern and is saying that India, along with all the Indian Ocean rim countries, must come together in order to revitalize the ancient trade networks in this particular region so as to reduce their dependence on China. Now, China is aggressively investing in port infrastructure and several other types of infrastructure in these countries. It is providing a very low cost financing loans, but those loans, the conditions of the loans are designed in such a manner that those countries fell in debt trap. And to avoid this situation, the Maldivian president has come up with such an idea. So, in this very sense, now we should also look at what are those important trade routes which were there in the ancient period. Now, first of all, we should understand that during the ancient period, it was the monsoonal winds which used to drive the trade. For example, during the winter months, that is from November to February, we know that the winds blow in this particular direction, which we call them as northeast monsoon. So that is why during these months, most of the trade took place in this very direction. Similarly, as monsoon refers to the seasonal reversal of winds, and during the summer months, that is from April to September, when winds used to reverse their direction in such a manner, these winds were known as the southwest monsoon. And therefore, during this corresponding period, the trade which used to take place in this region was in the same direction. So here if you can see that these were some of the important cities which were connected through these ancient maritime trade routes. For example, it was Cambay, Surat, Masulipatam, Calicut and Quilon in India. Then Sri Lanka, which earlier was known as Ceylon, was also connected. Then in the East Asia part, there were cities of China also connected through the Southeast Asian cities of Malacca, Palembang, etc. Similarly, on the eastern side of Africa, we had Mombasa, Mozambique, Kilwa. These were some of the famous cities. Malindi. These were some of the cities which were connected. Makkah and Aden in West Asia and Hormuz in Iran. So these trade networks which were already existing should be revived, and for this we should cater to the knowledge of all the important stakeholders like navigators, sailors, researchers, etc., who have the knowledge of these ancient trade routes, who also have the knowledge of the modern necessities of the maritime navigation, so that the traditional knowledge can be combined with the modern information, and hence such routes can be strengthened so as to reduce the dependence on any one particular country. So this article basically talks about all these things. Now this article has appeared at page number 4 and is in relation to the Nationalist Socialist Council, which is operating in Nagaland as a faction group. The context of this very news article is that recently Nationalist Socialist Council of Nagaland, or the Isaac Muiwa faction of the NSCN, has said that Nagas cannot merge with India but cannot live apart from Indians as well. This means that according to him, politically, the Nagas cannot merge with the state of India, but still, even if they are separated, there will be a strong interdependence of the Nagas and the rest of the Indian people. So, in this very regard, as far as the UPSC scheme of syllabus is concerned, this topic falls under General Studies paper 3, that is the internal security. This topic can also be referred in the section of regionalism. Now, the question from internal security, that is left wing extremism, is very common in civil services. For example, in 2017, the question was asked: the northeastern region of India has been infested with insurgency for a very long time. Analyze the major reasons for the survival of the armed insurgency in this region. Similarly, in 2018, the question was asked: left wing extremism is showing a downward trend, but still it affects many parts of the country. You were asked to briefly explain the government of India's approach to counter the challenges posed by left wing extremism. So that is why, as far as the today's news article is concerned, it is just about the political statement. However, from the examination's perspective, we need to be aware about the whole historical context about the movement of this greater Nagaland and its associated dimensions. So let us begin this discussion. So the history of this movement goes back to the British period when India was a colony of British. The British entered into the northeastern India for the demand of timber. But there they realized that there were several tribal groups having a common background but very different cultural practices. And that is why they decided to keep those cultural practices but within the overall ambit of British power. But we all know that British looted that region up to a very huge extent, and the socio-economic conditions of the tribal groups further deteriorated in that particular area. Now jump to the period of India's independence, that is the decade of 1940s. When it was almost clear that India is going to be independent, various tribal factions were confused regarding their own future status. They were wary about the feeling that the plains people, that is, the people living in the plains, who were then called as outsiders, will enter their areas and they themselves will be ousted from their own region. These outsiders will invade those areas, they will develop their economic centers in those areas, and the culture, the original, the root culture of tribal groupings in those areas will be devastated. And as a reaction, in 1945, Naga National Council, that is NNC, was established. And this NNC, under the leadership of Mr. Fizo, declared their own independence on 14th August 1947, that is one day prior to India's independence on 15th August. And on this very day, they demanded the independent state of Nagaland, which will not be the part of the Indian Union. They demanded a separate sovereign state. In line with this, in 1950, in order to further pressurize the Indian government, this NNC was further divided into two major groupings. The first was the Naga Federal Government and the second was the Naga Federal Army. Now NFA, that is the Naga Federal Army, was an armed group which aimed to pressurize the India's government in order to fulfill their political demands. And in the backdrop of this armed insurgency, the Indian government sent its armed forces to the northeastern India and AFSPA was imposed in those areas. Still, AFSPA is continuing in several areas of Nagaland. Further, jumping to the 1975 Shillong Accord. The Indian government signed Shillong Accord with these Naga tribal groups and they promised to surrender their arms. But there were some leaders of this very organization who were not happy and they decided to divide the NNC, and then the Nationalist Socialist Council of Nagaland was formed. Further division of NSCN led to the creation of NSCN-IM. The major demand of the NSCN-IM today is creation of Greater Nagaland. Now let us understand that what is this Greater Nagaland. Now if you go by the northeastern India, this is the rough map of northeast India. Now, Nagaland is somewhat here. However, several Naga tribes find their presence in the state of Assam, Arunachal, as well as Manipur also. So, the concept of Greater Nagalim is that all those areas where the Naga tribes exist must be combined together in order to make a new Nagaland state. So that means that NSCN IM demands certain areas of Arunachal, Assam, as well as Manipur. So this is the historical background of the movement of Nationalist Socialist Council of Nagaland. But their demand have several issues which has led to the stalemate of peace accords and peace negotiations. The first and foremost is the challenge to India's unity and integrity. If there is some organization who is demanding for a separate sovereign state from India, it directly challenges the India's own sovereignty. The second major issue involved is of state reorganization. Even if we accept the demand of Greater Nagalim, it will be very difficult because then the state reorganization must have to be done. And negotiations with Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, as well as Manipur might not be concluded because these states have clearly stated their claim that they will not give an inch of their area to any organization. The third major issue is the internal disputes within these insurgent groups. For example, the Naga nationalist political groups. Now, this NNPG comprise of 7 organizations. They are also the extremist organization who on some issues are in direct conflict with the NSCN IM. For example, the groups in NNPG are ready to hold peaceful talks with the Indian government and become part of India. And further, there is one larger issue at stake also. If Indian government adhere to the demand of these organizations, there will be a ripple effect across India. The insurgency in Jammu Kashmir, the Maoist movements in central and central east India will increase their activities also because it will signal that Indian government has ceded to the armed rebellion of some particular group. So that is why this issue needs to be tackled not on ground but on political tables, and the negotiations must be held peacefully in order to come at certain mutually beneficial conclusions. So moving towards our reference article. This article reads Cabinet Note for Climate Pledges. This article is in the context that the pledges which were made by India's Prime Minister in the Glasgow summit has been ratified by the India's cabinet. However, there is one important thing in this that the approved pledges were fewer than those our Prime Minister committed to. So, in this very regard, you should know that what were those pledges which were committed by our Prime Minister at the Glasgow summit. So, for this, I would request you to go back to the Sunday DNS of week 1, November 2021, whereby all the pledges related to the Glasgow summit were dealt in detail by Webber sir. For example, here you can see the Panchamrit, that is the 5 nectar elements of the pledges in the Glasgow summit. So you have to go back to the DNS of week 1 November 2021 in order to recollect all the pledges which were made in the Glasgow. So now let us move towards the question of the day. The question from yesterday's DNS was, there were 2 statements given and you had to find the correct statement. The statement 1 was, BSNL is a 100% Government of India owned public sector undertaking. Statement 2 was, Telecom Equipment and Services Export Promotion Council has been set up by FICCI to promote and develop the export of telecom equipment and services. So, one only, that is option A, is the correct answer. The question from today's DNS is, World Population Prospects 2020 report has been recently released by which of the following organizations? A. World Bank, B. World Economic Forum, C. United Nations, or D. Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. So that's all for today. All the very best and study hard.